I'm ahead to 15th of March, and Napoleon just started his move forward. Unfortunately, Napoleon didn't go. He failed his role. However, Ney made his and moved forward first, and Davout, who's now commanding Massena's forces, pushed forward as well. So we're going to have the problem of balancing the troops and figuring out how to get them into place. I have Lefebvre up with me. He's helpful for that. And Bessier is as well. The problem with, and Ney is not bad, the problem with people like Davout, well, Davout's not bad. He holds 5. So he's pretty good, actually. And only costs 3. So I don't know what I need Lefebvre for. It's not like I don't have an excess of leaders. I got folk kicking back here. Actually, Murat's very good. I should have him up there, too. Let's throw him in there. But the problem is, with Napoleon not moving there, the Russians see an opportunity, and this is between the turns. So the Russians moved Bennigsen, and actually Blucher charged forward. Essen and Barclay were too slow. However, we'll be able to move them on our turn, and we may be able to get a strike in on either Ney or Davout, which, you know, is kind of sealing the coffin for Napoleon, because he's counting on every little troop counts, and whatever factors there are, and Ney is holding a fair number. He's got 5 on his side, and then Davout's got another 4, and those are, you know, they may not seem like significant forces, but at this point in the game they are. On the other hand, what it means is the Russians are out in the open and not boiled up in the or packed up in the town where I expected them to be. So, you know, if I hadn't fallen, if my command hadn't kind of ended up somewhat disorganized, if Napoleon was up front, Bennigsen may not have come out at all. So we'll see how this goes, because Ney might be able to withdraw or something. And for the Russians, this is going to be a horrible balancing act, because I've got a fair number of commanders in place, all the major generals and whatever, that I might be able to dispatch troops to and get, you know, better organizational capabilities. I've got to figure that out, and that's a pain in the butt in any of these designs. And then on top of that, then I have to match the right cards to the right units, and then get, you know, maybe I need an envelopment card or something like that to be played for one of the units. I have this humongous constraint problem, and wow. And that's why I say scheduling constraints. It's all the same kind of thing. It's really not an easy task, and it's not a fun task to do manually. If you've ever tried doing scheduling manually, it's not pleasant at all. Some games are all about that, in a way, TV Wars, but it's a much simpler problem there than it is here. And here I'm going to probably have to spend about a half hour looking at it if I want to do it right. Maybe I'll get lucky, but I'm really afraid of this. Luckily I have a little bit of time left, but wow, not a happy prospect. More like 10 or 15 minutes, because I've gotten more used to the system, but it's painful. I mean, it really is. What I found was, hey, I can move all of Bennigsen the right distance, so maybe it was actually less than that, but the whole turn took about 10-15 minutes. Russians moved forward. Ney was able to get his withdrawal. So now the Russians are slightly exposed, but I've got my biggest force forward. I've got additional supporting units in place. It's pretty questionable whether or not Napoleon can beat that. Now, he doesn't know how powerful Bennigsen is, but there was a touch between the units, so he has an idea, and that's a big force. However, what choice do I have? You know, I kind of have to try to bring it to battle. I can try to bring an ancillary force to battle, but it's easier for me, like with the city, it's easier for me to hit Bennigsen and hope one of these guys can't make it than to hit one of those guys and hope Bennigsen can't make it. And I'm going to have to face that big force at some point or another. It doesn't have to take attrition if it's playing crappy little cards like this. Of course, if we're farther away, they can't engage us, but you know, what am I going to do? Be able to slip into here? I've got to, it's the strength points I have to destroy. It's not taking the city that's that important. So, there's really not a lot of hope here except bringing him to battle. The French position here is somewhat problematic, or more importantly, the Russian position that the French are considering attacking. Bennigsen's here with a big force, presumably. I know I'm going to be able to know this is the main force by throwing a vedette against it. I'm just looking at the situation ahead of time because I kind of use the vedettes loosely, as I've mentioned before. But anyway, there's a stream here, which means I'll be facing affecting terrain if I attack across here, but, and it's only snow, somewhere or another, his secondary rivers only cost, oh no, they cost +1 movement point. Yeah. So there's no bonus to the freezing weather. These things don't freeze over and become, and that makes sense. If they're big enough to show on the map, they probably do not here in Germany. Which means if I want to attack Bennigsen from clear terrain, I got to get over here, or maybe power my way around the lake here, which looks kind of dangerous, and it's got woods, which if I have cav will be reduced. Well, I don't think so, not attacking out of it. But the danger, of course, is getting cut off down there. If I come this way, I'll be facing Essen in affecting terrain and have to, you know, attack him, which may or may not mean a separate attack. I could do a soak-off attack on him. So my job is a little bit harder geometrically than I thought it would be, especially since Napoleon's way back here. I think I'm not going to be able to launch the attack this turn because of the terrain, actually, which is kind of neat. That's usually not something that comes up where there's like, it's a shame because I've kind of gotten Bennigsen sort of exposed here, but not as much as I had hoped. That may mean it's worth trying to make the attack on Essen and just hope that the Russians roll a 6. I mean, I'm going to need a lot to win this scenario, given where the French are right now. But the French decided to pack it in and moved back here to Preußisch Holland. Anyway, the Russians decided not to play a reaction card because Bennigsen's force is so huge and is all conglomerated under his command. He can't assign it to anyone else. That he'd be pretty much taking attrition or otherwise just moving maybe 1 or 2 movement points instead of where he wants to go. So he's going to have to reorganize his force to get it moving again. Which is kind of a neat factor of all of this. It's one of the reasons I kind of favor the harsher interpretation. You know, not just, oh yeah, I can dispatch this, because on the other person's turn you can't just do things on the fly. So I kind of largely follow the intention of the rule without necessarily bolting down every letter of it. Anyway, with Napoleon pulling back here, Bennigsen for the most part just wants to get back to his home base. He doesn't see any reason to pursue the full force of the French army and give it a chance of winning a defensive victory. I don't need to do that. Anyway. All right, so the Russians pull back a little bit. They're not able to move fully because of supply considerations off the chart. The weather's... Oops. Crap, the weather's worse than I thought it was. I thought it was frozen. Nah, screw it. I mean, I would have played more cards and done something differently, but it took me 10 minutes to figure out the card I needed to play, because once you start getting these large size forces, you're trying to economize as much as you can. Just give them it's not like they're running low on cards. It's just crazy. Napoleon chose to do nothing because his force is dispositioned in a particular way. He's got additional troops available next turn. Well, he's got them available this turn, but he didn't have them deployed. And if he plays around with his forces, maybe he'll be able to get things so that he can move them reasonably, and maybe the weather will be good or something. I don't know. You know, it's so hopeless right now for him that it's very hard to go on. By the way, I don't know if I mentioned, this is not quite a Clash of Arms map, but it does have a really nice texture to it. That explains why it's so poochy, though. Luckily, these games, there isn't a lot in the way of counters on the board, so they don't pop all over the place. The one exception to that, well, probably if there's other in this, there are others in this series, is the 6 Days of Glory that I had, that or have and covered. That particular game doesn't use holding boxes in quite the same way as these do. It may have, it provides them, I think, but it was difficult. No, I don't think it does. Well, I'll take a peek, but I don't think it does. Anyway, that particular game without the off-map holdings had all the problems that the Pucci COA maps have. And I think that game was actually by Clash of Arms as opposed to the OSG ones. But it's nice to see that kind of decent texture. There's, you know, it's like a piece of parchment or something. It's always wonderful to touch these better quality maps, even if they suck if you have, you know, any pieces on them. And you really do have to kind of flatten them in a way that, you know, you don't have to with the other modern types of map. We're ending it here. Napoleon's marched forward. He's facing Bennigsen, but he's got Barclay, who came in here. Bennigsen got reinforced. And, you know, the strength points, when I look at them, are just ridiculous. But Napoleon has to defeat these forces in order to have any chance of winning. He has to drive the Russians off, and it's worth a shot. In terms of the kind of considerations that I have for the campaign as a whole, it does make sense that Napoleon would have to fight this battle. So, unlike some games where I feel like, you know, the victory conditions put this binary one lost idea on it, and this doesn't. It's just, I'm losing as bad. If I leave the Russians alone, I'm losing as badly as I possibly can. So I must take the initiative here. All right. And the French actually were able to move everything forward together because this card gives me a 0+, and the weather's frost, which is fine even for the French, I think. I think they took a loss. Anyway, screw it, I cheated for the Russians last turn, I'll cheat for the French this turn. Because the plus is going to take effect because they are the French. But I had enough cards, I could have done this, and I think this is going to be the last battle of the game. Not because, you know, necessarily this is going to go off the track. I don't think it will, although it might. But because I'm just not going to continue in a hopeless situation. The problem the French face is we do have to attack Barclay. Now, if we attack the two together, it's going to be affecting terrain. So we're going to try the first round. We're going to try sending one of these units forward. Now, I'll say they have pitched battles. They could have arranged it, I guess. So this is wooded hills. It's the same as woods. Attacking into it has a penalty, and Cav, no matter what, has a penalty, but there's no bombardment. Okay, great. So we're not going to know what we're facing, but we know it's the smaller force, and I think I'm going to send Davout this way. He gives me a star. Of course, he has more Cav. Yeah, let's send Ney this way. He'll take less of a penalty, I guess. So Ney's infantry is 5 times 0.75 plus 0.5 Cav. And again, I'm not rounding. I think you're supposed to round, but there's no real point to it. You can get your odds just as well without. whereas Barclay has 2 infantry and a 3rd point. So we're going to be looking at a 1-to-1. Both have a star. It's in affecting terrain. And we'll resolve this one first for no real good reason. What about pitched? Barclay wants pitched because he wants to hold this force pinned, and might as well do it with Ney too. So we were at 1-to-1 in affecting terrain 3. The French are going to take the bigger loss here. 2 strength points. I'll take one of these cav points. Now this is part of this unit, so it doesn't actually disappear in case I get reinforcements. And Barclay takes a hit. Cav is easier to replace right now. There's more cav replacements available. Okay, so that is the French side, but now Barclay is going to have to attack back. He's going to have to hit that whole hex. I probably would have taken a pursuit battle rather than the pitched if I thought about this carefully. See, the weird thing here is I should be able to combine or let Bennigsen do that. So I'm going to put a pause here on that Barclay battle. Normally you'd be handling each individual battle for the first 2 rounds, but it doesn't make sense here because Napoleon's sitting there. So let's go on to the other side, the first half. And I'm just making up shit here. All right, so the first question is cav superiority because the Russians have artillery. And Blucher has 2, 3. I just happen to know that offhand. Russians have 4 cav, and forgetting Ney. It was Ney who was there, not Davout. All right. Well, Ney has to take Milhaud. Okay. I wonder if I counted wrong. No, I don't know. 0.5, I don't know. Anyway, I think I must have counted Ney correctly. All right, so Davout is attacking here instead. So I don't remember what I had for cav. It was some number. 1, 2, 3, 4. We're not going to have 2-to-1 odds. We do have 4 artillery though, so we get to pound with that. No penalties. We miss. And now I count my numbers, and I'm going to back away for that. You don't need to see me count anymore. You know that I'm not very good at it, but can manage. It ends up a good old 1-to-2 in non-affecting terrain, which is the same thing. If I get a lucky roll here, it's good. The Russians want to take pitched battle. The French clearly have to. And the attacker takes the larger loss, 2-to-1. Not enough to cause a possible bad check. So we will take 1, 2, and the Russians take a hit on some infantry or something. Now the Russians have to counterattack. Now I can't bring Barclay in this attack, and that's why it's kind of weird, because Barclay has to counterattack Davout or Ney, but it doesn't really make sense when everybody's in one hex. That's why I'm kind of fudging this here. So now the Russians had 18. They should have some other number now because they took a hit. Whereas the French, I don't know what they have because Ney's in here. So 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And it looks like it's going to be 1-to-1 here. The artillery does not fire, and this is on non-affecting. French are going to take pursuit, because if they lose this, It just doesn't matter. The Russians are going to continue with pitched because they want to force the French to attack again. So it's 1-1. And not good for the Russians. Since they took pitched, they have to take the losses. So Napoleon will, I guess, take a hit on Ney. I'm not quite sure. What was my Barclay total? He had 3 strength points. Yeah, I'll take the hit on Ney. And Barclay is not involved in this, so he won't be taking additional losses. So that's just going to be a 1-1. Oh, wait, no, I don't want to do that because he actually goes in there and has an effect. So I guess I'll take I don't want to lose the French unit. I don't know if this thing can recover any strength points. I get good luck. You gotta kind of look through and see, are there any Bavarians or whatever the hell they are? I don't think so. Okay. Did I take my 2 losses off the Russians? I did not. So he'll take 2 more of his big Russian infantry here. And now the French would have had to retreat, and they have the option to retreat, but they kind of want to keep going in the hopes that they can win this. You know, they knew what the odds were. Now, the French have picked 1 pursuit battle, or 1 pitched battle. The Russians have picked 2, so the Russians have to pick a pursuit from now on. The French are going to pick the pitched. In the case that they get defeated, they want to stick around and see if they can deal the Russians a counter blow. I have to recount, but we can do Ney quickly. Ney's got 4 strength points times 0.75 is probably like 3. To 2.5, which is 1-1, no mods, affecting terrain. Not good. He takes 3 hits. That all comes off Ney. That's a possible major loss, since the Russians lost nothing on a 3 or less. There goes a morale point. Could be over, you know, legitimately here. Certainly if Napoleon falls it is, but that's pretty unlikely. He's got a fair amount of troops. Okay, back to the Napoleon side now. Has his cav been decreased a lot? I don't think much. He's got 3. We got 1, 2. We got like 4 here, I think. Okay. So we go back to the artillery table. And this is a killer when one side has artillery and the other doesn't, just because they can rack up some losses in these smaller battles. And we do. We get a hit on the French. Guess I'll take it on Saint-Cyr. I actually had extra troops left, but I had filled out my army as much as I possibly could. I guess I could build some march regiments, but I think those have to be built back at the center of operations and shifted forward. Okay. So now we count. And that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 for the French. That's it. And the Russians 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. That's 1-3 on the non-affecting. And the French are taking pursuit. Oh, geez. The French were taking pursuit before. I don't know. No, the Russians are taking pursuit. The French took a pitched because they want the Russians to attack back. Okay. So 1-3 on non-affecting. Oh, excellent. We take 5. Yeah, it's over. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And on a 5 or less, the French are knocked off the board. And look, the French army routes, it's all over. And probably Napoleon would be captured anyway if we continued into the Russian counterattack that's coming. And look, the 1807 campaign ends with a good Russian victory. Excellent. Like I said before, I think that the French suffered pretty badly in trying to take here in terms of bad luck. Beyond that, I don't know that they had any really horrendous luck. This clusterfuck down here, I don't know how to resolve without sending reinforcements from the north. I think the one thing, so there's that rule that supported cantonment, which is that the Russians have to, like, that whatever forces there are have to be in towns or else the bad weather would affect them. But honestly, I think the Russians could have defended. There's a lot of towns down here. They could have set up. They were largely set up in towns. It's just there was some risk. I don't know how bad it is because they could have chosen cards to prevent that risk from being any reality. It's different from the other systems where, oh hey, you've got a force and it's out and it's a bad time to be out and you're going to take losses. It's not like you're taking them on the zero cards table or anything like that. You still, if you have good supply network, etc., you can be vaguely operating in the winter in the worst of weather without any problem. Obviously, the game was a hell of a headache for me, especially at the beginning. As I got more used to it, it did get easier. Partially because I got used to, okay, look, screw it, man. I'll just pick a card that works. I'm not going to try to optimize that problem. It's hard enough with the Zucker designs to optimize, well, to schedule, to end up coming with up with an optimal solution to how to get your forces where you want them to be. It's a real pain in the ass. Way worse than something like supply in the operational combat system, the World War II stuff like DAC and stuff. At least with my limited experience of Burma. Maybe it gets a lot worse in some of the bigger games. Probably DAC isn't a good example of it, but some of the Russian front stuff, it may just become such a nightmare of supply. Desert Fox can be a nightmare of supply. Just because there's so many things you can balance and try to figure out that you want to go forward to. But this, I think, exceeds that as well. I don't know of anything that is as painful in general as trying to get a large group of forces that are kind of operating together to work properly in one of these Zucker designs. It is one of the biggest headaches. Obviously, there are games that are just unplayable, and this is not among that. But it's coming pretty close for me in terms of just, having to optimize over a set of constraints as to what you can get where. If you don't really give too much of a care to it, it might not be that big a deal. I found that I could optimize very easily over in Napoleon at Bay, though, because there weren't these huge clusters of forces. And the games may end up being a little too bloody, or maybe not, in the sense that they're decided often way earlier than the campaigns are, at least with me playing them. Maybe it's me that's a little too bloody. I'm not sure. There's a lot to like about the system in theory, but the actuality of them ends up being a headache for me and just not a great deal of enjoyment, with the one exception of Napoleon at Bay, which, is streamlined, stripped away. It's prior to a lot of the advances that were put in for realism, for better accuracy, for more details, but also on top of that, the strategic situation available in the game is just, I think, more pleasant than in most of these. Also, the map is easy to read. The counters, not so much, but anyway. I'll come back with a review of this in a moment, but I'm kind of glad that we had a actual victory as opposed to me just bailing on the game.